Hello and welcome back to the Playing Out Loud podcast. Today in studio, we have two, I'm going to call you legends. Is that fair? Does legends seem all right? Maybe we'll put some statues up of you both. I don't know.
I guess if you've been around long enough, maybe you qualify for that. So longevity is...
There we go. Longevity legends. There we go. We have the wonderful Jan Dalton in studio. Welcome.
Thank you, Chelsea. Great to be here.
Yeah. And we have the fantastic Tom Czarny.
Oh, stop. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course. You two, just so that folks know, how many shows do you think you've both done together? Just a ballpark number, unless you're jotting it down somewhere.
Actually, I went through the list and I counted, and I believe it was 5.
5.
3 Shakespeare, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I've directed him a couple of times.
Okay.
But the first show together
was Dracula.
Dracula.
Back
Like straight play or comedy or musical?
Straight play.
Okay.
Well, I guess. Guy Molin was ready, our director was ready to kill us after a while.
Okay.
And there were 3 guys in the cast named Tom.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
And so when we would mess around, he'd yell, "Shut up, Tom." Well, we didn't know who to blame. So we would get away with all kinds of things.
I feel like that's a great setup for who's on first, you know?
Very much so.
That's all right. I would have thought it would have been more like, I don't know, 10 or 12, because I feel like y'all, between Shakespeare, but I don't know, maybe, obviously less, 5 at this point. Maybe we can get it into 12.
Yeah, which is surprising in that way. But yeah, Much Ado, Wizard directed that one, and then we did it again in the park. Well, I directed that in the park, but with Riverside Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And most recently, we did The Minutes.
Yes.
In the studio theater. So
that's how...
The studio should not be missed. We should talk about that at some point, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Studio shows are the best.
Yeah. Well, great. Let's get into your bios so we can maneuver our way into the meat of work. So, Jan, you have been in theater since you were young, right? I mean, you graduated from UC Berkeley. You got a BA in dramatic arts from UC Berkeley. You did several shows in the San Francisco area. You also worked in Vienna. I have questions about that. But that was not your day job.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. But I just go back a little. I had a terrific high school drama teacher. And it was, for me, an interesting thing in that my dad didn't like me. He wouldn't let me take drama classes.
Okay.
So I would go and audition for the plays. And she was one who did shows that really pushed the envelope, if you will. We did, I was thinking, Albee, George Bernard Shaw, Harold Pinter, Jean Ennui, which was Antigone, which is a production done in evening dress, but also Girardot, who did Mad Woman of Chaillot, which is actually a play that would love to see done here because of the greed and corruption that was written about that. And here we are going again. But also, my family moved a lot. And my dad was a Methodist minister, and we moved around a lot. And when he moved me at the end of my junior year into my senior year, he felt bad for me, uprooting me for that last year. So he let me take a drama class.
Oh.
And I was a kid in a candy shop. And I was the first one to audition. I was the first one to volunteer. I just dove in both feet in that. And it was fun, too, that director at that high school said, if I knew you were coming, I would have done a better play.
Oh.
But anyway.
What was the first play that you did there in high school?
In high school, A Slight Ache by Harold Pinter.
Harold Pinter's very familiar.
Well, there's a theater named after him in London.
Okay.
So he's very well known for his, I don't know how to describe quite all his plays. They got absurd, a little esoteric. The Birthday Party, The Homecoming, A Slight Ache he took typical situations and then did something weird with them about it. But he was also an actor and a director in London in his time.
Okay.
But then, of course, George Bernard Shaw. We did Dark Lady of the Sonnets, which I later did with Tom. And so that would be another show that we did.
It would be
6. We're up to 6. We're going to find more. Wow, that's an interesting upbringing. So that was what kind of lit the fire for you, and then you decided to move on and do that at UC Berkeley.
At UC Berkeley, right. Again, much to my dad's chagrin, but I continued with it, and the classics just overflowed with being in a production of Peer Gynt by Henrik Ibsen, and that was a lifelong love affair with Ibsen as well, and did Jean Ennui again, who did Antigone. We did another show with that, but I did a couple of summers of Shakespeare, and
yeah.
Oh, and one thing on to mention, I'll bring it around to Moliere Moliere again was that summer, this theater that I worked at, it was a husband and wife team, and he was an expert in commedia dell'arte. He was Italian, and he taught it, he taught it, he lived it. And we did a lot of movement in that Taming of the Shrew and also Comedy of Errors, another show that we were in together.
Holy smokes.
But that turned out to be something that was the background for Moliere and how he developed his plays, his exposure to commedia dell'arte, which was started 100 years probably before he did. So all of that was fascinating to me.
Yeah, I remember studying commedia dell'arte as part of my theater degree, and I was so fascinated by it because I had been to Venice, Italy a couple years prior, and I had purchased a handmade mask in Venice. And I remember looking at the walls and seeing why do some of these have really long noses? And why do some of these look like birds? And all these different things. And I look back at some of the pictures I took of that particular artist's store, just walls head to toe covered in all these masks.
It's like that in Florence too.
Yeah, commedia dell'arte. And hoping to go to Florence, so I will have to add that to my list. But
great town.
Yeah, and then the next time I saw commedia dell'arte, I can't remember the name of the play, but the whole thing was basically based in commedia dell'arte. And ever since then, I've had this very sincere desire to explore that, but not enough time to take classes or things like that in it. But it is really a great foundation for many playwrights and many even modern day work. We just don't see it as clearly as they used to.
Moliere took those characters, the young man, the old man, the miser, and the wonderful servants were the jokers and such. But he then made depth of character with these people and didn't do them with masks. But you still had those same typical characters in all of his plays.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. You found your way to Northern Michigan, and you've been doing theater here for 30 years plus at this point.
Right.
Obviously, many things over the time at Old Town Playhouse, which is how we met.
Right.
For my first and only Moliere play, Tartuffe, you've directed tons of things. You've sat on the artistic board, artistic committees. We did discuss Dracula. You have just quite an array of different plays that you've been in. Noises Off in particular, I assisted directed that in Grand Rapids many years ago now, but what role did you play? Did you play the director or?
That was the part that I wanted. I ended up playing, what was it? Was it Charlie? Was that? Or Freddie? Freddie.
Okay.
With the dropping his pants and the sardines and all that. And I just have to say on that show, that is one of the hardest, most difficult shows I ever did.
Yeah.
When you pick up the script to look at it, it's written in columns for the different actors. And you almost can't read it when you look at the script. And the timing to be able to stop and start to work on scenes was virtually impossible because everybody's doing something else.
Yeah.
So, but an amazing thing. But once you have it, and that sort of keys in with what I love about being an actor and being in theater is once you have a role and you have mastered what you're doing with everything involved, it's hard to describe. It's like a new skill that you've just, not skill is the word, you just the satisfaction. And
I couldn't agree more. I will say, having assistant directed it, it's still my dream to direct that show. But it is like choreography, right? When we think about us as actors. And I know you experienced this a lot when Aaron directed The Minutes. You're given that creative freedom, ideally, to create your character and explore and try things and really think through your script and dive into all those pieces. But with something like A Noises Off, it's like, okay, no, I do need you here at this certain point. And you got to say this line by this. That's a bit more choreographed. So it does make that challenging because there's also no music, but it definitely feels like you're in a high-paced, I don't know, cabaret or something in shows like that.
The beauty of the way Aaron directed The Minutes was by giving us the freedom. The actors eventually create this wonderful synergy.
Yeah.
And it's self-directed. And so he arrives at probably his desired end product simply by letting the actors work with each other and develop that synergy.
Exactly. Yeah. You have a story to tell that isn't your own, and you all come together to interpret it and understand it and put it together. And that's the beauty of it. And not an easy feat. I mean, I think about Tartuffe, which you've directed, Jan, Philadelphia Story, Ideal Husband, and The Mousetrap. When you have multiple bodies, many bodies on stage, that gets complicated really fast. You've also directed it with the Glen Arbor Players, right? You directed last year?
Last year, Kalamazoo, that was a 2-person show.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. But a lot of work for me because we decided to go off book instead of a stage reading. So
that's a lot.
Yeah. That was a challenge.
Jan is very creative as a director.
Yeah. What's really funny is that I got to see Jamie Lamont formerly More Years last night. And I hadn't seen her probably since that season when we did Tartuffe. And then I did Hay Fever after that. So it'd been so long. And I said, do you remember those big skirts we had to wear? And Jan used to make us put our heels on and walk across the stage. And you'd stand in the far back of the theater and say, nope, your hips are moving. Go start again. It was so great. But it really helped us get into that character of exactly who those needed to be in their costume, because that's so imperative also to your character is like, what are you wearing and how is that informing you?
Well, I loved that play. That was my favorite play to direct.
Yeah.
And it has been the case for me I haven't directed that much, but I came at it from an actor's point of view. But I love my cast.
Yeah.
The ensemble, the working towards this goal. And that one in another wonderful performance, and that was Mike Nunn,
Yes.
who played Orgon, the father. And he wanted Tartuffe so badly. But it was so important that he play that straight role, because he was that idiot in that Moliere play, which there always is, that believes that he's the only one that's right. He can do no wrong, and it's his way or the highway, and yet everybody takes advantage of him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's where I got to meet Maria McCain, or as I like to say, the Maria McCain.
that's someone else. She's one of the best actors in this area that I've worked with.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, she was Prospero in The Tempest.
Right?
Oh, yes.
Right.
And
yes.
you were Caliban.
I was Caliban.
Yeah.
You
And
kept grabbing our ankles during the show. That wasn't very nice.
and did you may have heard Riverside is going to do that show again this summer. They're having auditions in May for it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're bringing it back. The Tempest, I think this will be their first show since the pandemic. Yeah. So
I look back on that. I think we started 2005, and I was in several of the shows after that point. But that's a whole other story. Can go down that
Sure.
way. But that's wonderful that they're bringing it back.
Yeah.
And kudos to Jill Beauchamp and Brian Dungeon, because they were the ones that got it going. And Jill's love of Shakespeare. And, it was a free script. And I don't know if they got some insurance for the park. I assume they did.
Yeah.
But this the challenges in there, though, that we had.
Yep.
With the Father Fred cycles and the
And the
HVAC,
geese. And the geese.
And the geese.
And the ducks.
helicopters. Oh, the geese.
The geese. Man, one false step.
Well, as actors, you had to go out onto that hillside and rake it because of the geese.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I do remember I did one performance with them, Romeo and Juliet, that Guy William Molnar directed.
Oh.
And I had this running joke about the ducks because they just would fly in. And then some of them landed gracefully, others not so much. And so I would pick which duck felt like that day. And so even to this day, there's a couple folks I did that show with, and we'll talk about ducks. So it's an oldie and a goodie. Okay, you've also did work with Parallel 45 when they were here, and the Traverse City Opera Company, who we haven't heard from in a few years. I'm not sure if they're still doing work or planning work, but interesting. I don't mean this poorly, but you've gotten around a bit, Jan.
Yeah, he gets around.
But that's great for
I
a
just
region,
like to
too.
stay busy, and I love to be asked, like you asking me to do this. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I swear I put in as much stress and angst as I did for this as I would an audition or something. I care enough about it in that. But I was fortunate to work with Sarah Hartley, who she had a contact with, and I don't remember there was two women that got it going for the Traverse Opera Company. And they did a couple of recitals, but we had this opportunity to do this at Kirkbride.
Okay.
And they had transposed the arias that the men or the women sang, and me and another actor came out, and Sarah, and we acted out these little scenes saying the translation, and then they came out and sang, which was clearly the highlight. But Kirkbride was fantastic to work there.
It's a fun hall. It's historic and it's beautiful. I've seen the candlelight performances there with the quartets, and those are really lovely at night.
Right.
Amazing. Tom, your turn. What does Tom do? I'm not sure. I think you're still an educator. You're still educating people.
Always an educator.
Yes. Career educator in the sciences. You taught the AP or Advanced Placement Biology role at Traverse City Central High School.
Mm-hmm. Physics, too.
Physics as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
And anatomy and physiology.
Okay, well, let's just keep at it. What else? Painting? Did you do painting? Gym?
No, but every day was a performance.
I bet.
That's what I loved about teaching. It was a great gig. I taught in totality about 37 years.
Yeah.
28 years up here, 29 years here.
Okay.
I'm starting to fade.
Teacher of the year, I think, several times.
Well, that's when it's happened. You grease somebody's palm with $100.
Voted by the students, right?
Yeah. But it was a great gig. I loved it. Yeah, 37, good grief, that long. But the beauty of the profession was I got to perform 5 or 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, because every class was a new audience.
Yeah.
And those kids come in, they're different people on a daily basis.
Yes, they are.
So you had to adjust on the fly.
Yeah.
And it was my goal to do more than just the sciences. You've got to introduce the arts into it as well.
Oh.
And I used to bludgeon my kids on the very first day with the opening to Henry V.
Ooh.
I said, okay, folks, we're going to go from the subatomic to the universal here. We're surrounded by these concrete walls. How are we going to do that? And the answer is Shakespeare. And I would pass out the prologue where chorus comes out by himself and addresses the audience, because above all, Shakespeare was also a businessman. He had to have fannies in the seats. He had to have these folks committed.
Yep.
And so that's what the prologue is all about.
Yeah.
He comes out and says, oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. And then he goes on to say, and it's your thoughts that must deck our kings, carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the events of many years into an hourglass. For the which supply permit me, chorus, to this history, who prologue like your gentle patience pray, gently to hear and kindly to judge our play. Come along on this journey. And the kids bought into it.
No, I love it.
So I got to imbibe, if you will, my joy of performing, especially Shakespeare. And I got to talk about wonderful subjects. So it was a great gig.
Amazing. I love that. I never would have put those together, but I remember distinctly having to memorize a couple of monologues from that play in college for my theater degree. And it was not easy, but I feel like if somebody maybe my biology class would have gone better. I don't know.
You never know.
But from an education standpoint, you have a master's in education in science and mathematics with a concentration in evolutionary biology.
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is. From Harvard University.
Ah,
So we got East Coast and West Coast clearly represented here.
especially UCal Berkeley. You know,
Yeah, I think you're both the first folks on the podcast that represent those schools. And then you both found your way here to the Midwest. You've also been in many roles here at the Old Town Playhouse. Obviously, we've talked Riverside, definitely some pieces there. And most notably, at least for me, The Minutes this last fall. That's where I got to work with both of you on that play. I kind of want to segue, I guess, from that into how you both got to Traverse City. I know, Tom, you have an interesting story of how you got here, or is what I hear.
well, I grew up in Detroit.
Okay.
And when I was growing up, there was always a great northern migration from Detroit. It was called going up north. And you'd head up 75 and up the various tributaries. My dad just drove a truck for a living. But those were in the days where you could support a family of 5 kids and his wife, my mom, on the salary of a truck driver and live a decent life.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he did was he bought a little lakefront property in Sheboygan County.
Okay.
He and my mom were married right here in Interlochen on Green Lake. It's where they had their honeymoon.
Aw.
They always wanted to come back here. But even then, nobody could afford property. If you were a working man, you couldn't afford property here.
Okay.
So he bought in Sheboygan. And when we would go up and hang out in Sheboygan, it's a nice town, but not much to do for young folks.
Okay.
So I would jump in the car and head over to Traverse City.
Okay.
Because the fishing was much better here, the trout fishing was much better. There was skiing here, et cetera, et cetera. So when I was out on the East Coast going to grad school, my thought was always returning to Michigan because I'm a Midwestern guy, and those were my people. And I wanted to live in the Traverse City area. So when I was at Harvard, I should mention that on my walk to my lab every day, I would pass the American Repertory Theater, which is there on Brattle Street in Cambridge.
Okay.
And I couldn't help noticing that the folks going in and out of there on a daily basis were having a lot more fun than I was. And so one day I just decided, I want to go in and see what this is all about. So I wandered in and it happened to be during an open casting for the rep. And of course, I had never done anything. So, what the hell? I'm here.
Let's do it.
So I went out, gave my name, I went up there, and the first thing the director said, let's hear your monologue. I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't have a monologue prepared. So they were very polite. They were very kind. They said, why don't you take a seat and watch what happens? So I did. and I was fascinated by it. And when I graduated and I moved up to Traverse City, I was flat broke and uncountable tens of thousands of dollars in debt and had to live somewhere. So I lived in the state park until I got my first paycheck.
What?
Yeah.
Camp, like tent?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Put a tent up.
Wow.
And
You shave in the side mirror.
actually, the bathrooms were open well into the fall. And so I could roll out of my tent, walk out to take a shower. But unfortunately, rolling in and out of the tent, one day my assistant principal, Roger Wood, great man, called me over and he goes, "Czarny, stand still." He tried to brush me off. He goes, "You're covered with pine needles." Oh, thanks, Roger. So I lived in the state park for about a month until I secured a couple of paychecks and I could find a place to live.
Wow.
Oh.
Wow. That's commitment, I will say. That's a guy who knows what he wants and is going to do exactly what he needs to get it.
What was your first show at?
It was
Old Town Playhouse?
talk radio. I think it was either 89 or 90.
Okay.
Ross
Bogosian.
Bogosian,
You're right. Yes.
the
that's
writer.
right.
Yeah.
I remember him now.
And
Actor, too.
yeah. And I came out and auditioned and he gave me the lead. And it was the studio
Okay.
production. And so that's how it started off. And I didn't know anybody in Traverse City other than other teachers. You know, how boring they can be. No, sorry, fellow teachers. But I wanted to hang out with some theater folks. And that was my opportunity.
Well, you remembered how happy they were on Harvard's campus. So
What, to get rid of me?
No, the actors on campus were so happy. So you're like, I have to get some of that joy back into my life.
No, they were very kind. They were
Yeah.
very kind. It was a wonderful experience. Neither my mom nor my dad ever graduated from high school.
Okay.
And the fact that their son could
Yeah.
catch a break and go, that's the America that I love.
Yeah. It's a good piece. It's a good piece. I'd love to chat with you both. So that was your first show at Old Town Playhouse. Jan, what was your first show at Old Town Playhouse?
Dracula.
Dracula. Okay. What year was that?
94.
94.
It was,
Okay.
August, September, 94.
So your first show you both worked on together.
Yeah.
I was on his first show. I had been in talk radio, wasn't like in 90.
Right,
89
right.
or 90.
Yeah. Okay. What roles did y'all do in Dracula?
Well,
I don't know that show. I'm surprised. I know the movie from
Well,
the 30s.
He
but-
was the man.
It was.
He was
well,
Dracula.
It's to me, it's fun if you'll indulge me for a moment, just
Sure.
because arriving in Traverse City and having been out of theater for a while, I knew I wanted to get back in when we moved here. That's another story how we got here. But I went to this audition, and after that first night, I had a call from Guy Molnar. He said, "You're really good, but I don't know what role to cast you in." I was just thrilled because I was considering taking classes over at NMC because I had been out of theater for so long, which is rather amusing. Now in hindsight, I think, well, I don't even know if they had acting classes then at that point. But anyway, I came back on that second night and we're sitting in there and they were getting down to the people that had been called back. And I'm looking around the theater and I thought, who is he going to cast as Dracula? There's no one here that looks like Dracula. And then he chose me. And so I immediately said, well, I'll shave my beard off. No, I don't want you to shave. Well, I'll darken my hair. No, I want you just the way you are, some Nordic
Nordic
vampire or
Nordic
something.
god.
But that was such a serendipitous thing. The play itself was when the creature, like with Frankenstein, which I also did, by the way, when he's not on stage, the play lags. There's just so much dialogue between Van Helsing and Lucy's father, which you played,
Yeah.
whoever that was.
Yeah.
Seward.
But Guy directing that, and also we had this Michael Kay, who was the production designer. Brilliant to have him there. And we also had someone who did special props, and they made canines for me and for Mary Scott O'Connor, another terrific actress that I've worked with here, by the way. And I still have those canines to this day.
Do you really?
Yeah. And it was just wonderful. Then I went home and I made blood, which was thrilling. I figured out the combination of corn syrup and red and a little coffee creamer to make some opaqueness in it. And I slit my chest at one point, and Mary Scott just grabbed onto my breast and just blood all over her and the shirt. And that was the end of Act One. It was great.
Sounds like that needs to be redone.
But we had an exploding cross that they came up with.
Yeah, I got
It had some sort
I
of
built that.
flash paper in
Yeah,
there.
yeah. From my physics classes, we were building rockets. They would use this flash paper, in essence, to what blows the parachute out on an ascending.
Well, he held
rocket.
that thing up, and I just and it burst into flames. And we had
Wow.
a mirror that there was a guy behind it. We've discovered that it was best to use a real mirror each time. That he would, on cue, hit it with a hammer and it would just, a bat flying around.
The problem with the bat, though, the bat was an ornithopter, a toy ornithopter.
Yeah,
and that didn't cooperate very well.
Yeah.
I mean, they never do, right?
And that's half the fun. That's half the fun.
That's live theater for you.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask real quick, Jan, could you tell us a little bit about your Vienna origin story? You mentioned you traveled a lot growing up and school in San Francisco because of UC Berkeley, but I'm curious, we've talked a little bit about how y'all got here, but how did you land in Vienna, Austria?
Well, it's a wonderful story from my standpoint in that it's all about connections and keeping in touch with people and not burning any bridges from a previous, because you never know who might come around and all. You know that from your experience in the industry. So I was doing theater in San Francisco, and one of them, the director, put me in touch with another company in the foothills of Sierra, the Gold Country in California. And it was a repertory theater, and it was there where I learned that I could do a role in a week. So to this day, whenever I see, no matter how many lines I have, I know that I can do it because of that experience while you're working on the next show. But that director knew another director who would go once a year to this American theater in Vienna, Austria, and he would pull some of the actors from this group that were there at that rep, and he put me in touch with them. I contacted them. They said, if you can afford the trip out, please come out. And so it was a couple that ran it. To this day, there is a Vienna's English theater that is there, and this couple, she was an actress, he was a producer director. They decided to start their own American theater, and they did American plays in a small house. But within a couple of weeks, I was the White Rabbit, Alice in Wonderland. And I did 5 or 6 shows. That led to a German film that I was in, which was a great learning experience for me because I learned about being on a professional film set and these actors that I worked with, these German actors. And I was an American soldier in some scenes. That's what that was.
Wow.
But
how long were you there?
Over a year.
Oh, wow.
And what I wanted to say with that whole experience was that it's a typical small theater not typical small. In a typical theater, you start to have personality conflicts, you start to have artistic differences, and you have financial problems. And those things all sort of came to a head at one point. And they brought us all together one time about 8 or 9 months into my stay and said, we're not doing this show anymore. We are bringing in a show, and if you guys want to continue to be paid, you need to work backstage. And I thought, okay, what's the show? It was a drag queen show.
Oh, okay.
Which was, again, an interesting experience for me, but it also led me to my lifelong love of Josephine Baker because one of the performers did the banana dance.
Okay.
For those of you who don't know Josephine Baker, you should. She was brilliant in her time from the 30s and 40s, and her story from St. Louis to being loved in France. But anyway, working on that show, that was sort of the beginning of the end. But I was glad that I didn't gripe too much, and I learned about being a professional and not to burn bridges, because 6 years later, I came back as part of a 7-month trip that my wife, Julie, and I were on in Europe, and carved in the middle of it was a 6-week stint again at the International Theater there in Vienna, Austria, and we did The Mousetrap.
Oh, okay.
And I got into another film while I was there with Linda Blair.
Wow.
So
it really does pay. I think, one of the pieces of advice I got from a very famous comedian in Los Angeles was, be kind to everyone you work with because you never know what kind of doors those are going to open.
Right.
Even if they're not going to be your best friend, right? Even if you don't really want to do business with them in the future, be kind to everyone because it is a small world. Los Angeles is a, 10 million person region, but you'd be surprised how small the entertainment industry is out there. And Traverse City is, I think the last census was 15,000 people, even smaller, and the entertainment, performing arts sector, even smaller. But you never know who you're going to meet that will open a door to get you to Vienna or wherever.
Or even here. You can be performing on stage and you'll get an email from somebody. This happened to me, saying, would you be willing to audition for a movie?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to.
Yeah.
And it was a production filmed all here in Traverse City. It's called Quicksand.
Okay.
Tanner Presswood. Maybe you know him.
We've heard of him.
Okay. He was in it as well. And John Paul Morris was the director, all filmed here. And I had a role as a murdering psychotic cop. I guess I'm being typecast again.
Oh, dear.
it was a pretty good role, actually.
It was fun.
Yeah.
But it was simply because somebody had seen me in a production and sent an email. And it premiered here at the very last of the film festival. I think it was in 2023.
Okay.
And sure, you never know what's going to happen. Just
Yeah.
put yourself out there and see what happens. And
Yeah, that's how I got to Aquinas. I was kind of in between. I was planning to go to Columbia in Chicago, like transfer from Grand Rapids to Columbia. And I decided to do their little show. It was called Sleeper, The Sleeper by Catherine Butterfield. And not age appropriate whatsoever, but what are you going to do with community theater? And I did it, and I wasn't sure how it went. And then Randy Wyatt, who was the theater director at Aquinas, saw it, waited for me backstage, handed me his card, and said, I think if you don't go to Chicago, you should really come to Aquinas. And at the time, it was Aquinas was a small private Catholic business school. That's all I knew of it. But Randy was building something truly incredible. It became known as the little theater program that could. And it all kind of went from there. But yeah, you never know who you're going to meet along the way that'll open those doors.
And how wonderful it is to be asked.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chelsea, for asking
Oh,
us
of
here.
course, of course. I wanted to segue. You were talking about Vienna and like the little theater shop, right? Little playhouse. We all here have experienced, I would say, the joy of in town, at least through the playhouse, it's called studio shows or studio productions, which are typically just straight plays. There may be deeper in material, maybe a little bit more dynamic, certainly potentially newer. That can vary, right? But there's a bit more meat maybe to them than you might see on a typical main stage. Again, speaking mostly from the playhouse, but I know there's also other opportunities as other theaters have been around that have done similar work in different ways. But I'm curious to kind of dig into that a little bit of, what you both love so much about doing that kind of theater, that kind of like deeper work, like what draws you to it over something like, and I knew you played Beast, right? And Beauty and the Beast. Those are two very different ends of the spectrum. If you think about, for example, Beauty and the Beast and the Minutes, it creates dynamics within us as an actor. But I'm just kind of curious, what you both feel sentimentally or otherwise about doing shows.
Tom was in a couple of amazing pieces there. The Marjorie Prime and also The Father, which is an amazing play as well there. Speaking for myself,
Yes, thank you.
and also Waiting for Godot, I thought, Godot, and just the up close and personal with the audience. And I
Absolutely.
think that's what the audience liked. Being that depot was one of the best spaces that we ever worked on.
It was
here.
fabulous.
It was just fabulous.
I love that theater in the round, or
Yeah.
3/4 enclosed.
Was it like a 3/4 thrust?
And I think there
Okay.
was a regular allegiance, what's the word I'm looking for, with audience wanted to see these shows, and they were a little less expensive, and yet you got to be up close and personal, and it was, 80 seats?
Yes.
That's
you could
a nice
say whatever you
size.
want. You could do stuff. You could do mature themes.
That's a nice
And
size.
it's experimental theater in essence. And I love the intimacy with the audience. And for me, because I'm so myopic, I can take off my glasses and I don't recognize faces.
That's such a fun trick.
Because when you recognize a face, you're a little off kilter. And so I take these off and they're like the fourth wall that you don't penetrate. They're
Exact same for me.
Yeah.
I'm exactly the same way.
there. Yeah, it's quite marvelous.
It's invigorating, isn't it?
And on the main stage, you're isolated in a way. But the intimacy of having the audience right there, having folks lean forward to hear what you're saying is quite wonderful.
That's to a different degree. That's how I felt with the staged reading not that long ago. It's 92-seat theater, just that almost mid-size amount. It's not a real large theater, but it's also not like 30 people where you feel like you're in a speakeasy or something, or you're doing slam poetry. It's just a nice in-between there. And that's also why I liked also stand-up comedy. It was just, I liked being able to see a person and have a conversation and break that fourth wall in a very different kind of way. But curious about, you talked about like the intimacy, kind of breaking that barrier and feeling maybe connected differently to the audience. Do you feel like when you do, let's say, we'll just call it a main stage show or a larger production with a larger audience, do you feel like you're more performative in a sense than you are when you're doing a more intimate show where you can be, I don't want to say a little bit more yourself, but you can get into things a little bit differently, or you can try more dynamic, minutia, detail kind of work?
I think the fact that the audience is so close and can see your facial expressions much more clearly, you have to pay attention to that during your rehearsals. And to me, that makes a big difference because the eyes tell the tale. And that can be seen in the intimacy of the studio, not so much on the main stage.
Okay.
You could always go off, run and hide somewhere on the main stage as well, too, behind a pillar or
Ain't no place to hide in the studio.
More
I
vulnerable?
think it was primarily
Very.
the content that we did.
Yeah.
being at the plays that we were able to do out there. You have to do, the bottom line is always about the money. And that depot was always a loss leader, I thought. But just the plays, the amount of plays we were able, even before the depot, when we were doing them in the schmuckle before they built that wall in there, that was a terrific place to perform because there were so many different entrances and exits. You could come through the house and all like that. And it was a terrible place to rehearse, still is, because it's a shared space, but to perform in, it's terrific. So
Yeah, it is intimate. I think it's 60, 65 seats, something like that. It's
They shove a couple of extra rows in for the minutes.
Yeah.
I think we were pushing
Yeah.
80, weren't we?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something like
and
that.
it's still sold out well in advance of going up, which is just such a great accolade.
It's a tribute to Aaron and to you production folks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you did some marvelous work in promoting it. And
We had fun.
getting the word out on the street what it was about.
Yeah.
And folks resonated with that.
Yeah.
And they showed
And
up.
Yeah.
the content,
Exactly.
the script, Tracy Letts.
Yeah.
Those were things that drew me to it as well. So
I think one of my favorite things about working with people who really know what they're doing from a directing standpoint is, and this is how much Aaron and I align on this, but the first question I think he asked you all once you all got together was, who's the most important person in this play? And I don't know if you remember that, but the correct answer is the playwright. Like, that's the most important person, right? Because they wrote it. And so I think a lot of times I forget that as an actor. I think about all the different elements and what am I responsible for and all these different pieces. And it's sort of, you just start to collapse a little bit in on yourself in a sense, but you zoom out a little bit and you're like, the playwright, what's the playwright? And let's just look at this as a script and talk about this as a script. What's happening here? Where's the arc? What story are you telling? What story are you telling? Are they the same story? Do they have the same intention? All these different, pieces. And that's when I think the little lightning starts to happen.
Aaron also hammered about the fact that the script is his and how
right.
hard he worked on that. And how even though it might not seem right on a couple of these lines, you're not supposed to change it anyway.
Yeah.
But there's such a tendency, well, I think I could do this a little better.
Yeah. No. I mean, contractually speaking, I can tell you that, yeah, it is very illegal to change words or to cut scenes or to cut music or different things like
Without
that.
permission.
Without explicit permission, exactly, yeah. Even to change gender roles for scripts, unless it's, noted that this could be played by whomever kind of thing, because the playwright has that explicit content for a reason. I am curious from you both. You've seen so much, classical theater, new theater. You've done it all in between. What do you think in this year, 2026, kind of where we are holistically in this region or just in this world? Like, what's the hard stuff to do these days? What's hard about performing arts in this environment? Or is it not any harder than it was maybe 20 years ago?
Well, besides funding, which is on everybody's mind, the next one is starting to get a little long on the tooth here.
Yeah.
So
age,
aging
out.
Yeah.
You've got extra teeth, though, Jan. You just said earlier.
It was remarkable. When I started that first show, I was 42, and when I came here, and I remember doing Ernest, and Oscar Wilde had written in the script, a young man of 28, and there was expletive deleted right after I read that. But to go full circle in the minutes, I remember asking Ed Bronco, who was brilliant in that play, how old he was, because he was, besides Tom, perhaps one of the older people there, and he said 43, and I thought,
jeez,
damn.
I know.
That entire cast, himself included, except for perhaps Tom, could have been my child. And it's like,
I know.
It's hard and an exception, but it was also humbling too, because most of that cast did not know me. And so I had to sort of reintroduce myself all over again. So all these accolades and all this stuff I've done means diddly. So
yeah, the aging aspect of things is troublesome. The number of roles dries up. And you hope that we can pass for a certain age, younger than we appear. Makeup is a wonderful thing. But yeah, I've often wondered, maybe you know this, Jan, is King Lear the least performed of Shakespeare's major plays simply because of the age of the actors? Because you're a huge fan of Stratford in Canada.
right.
And I either read this or you told me about it, forgive me, I don't remember the details, that the individual who was playing Lear at Stratford had an earpiece and was being fed lines.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And so I was wondering, is Lear? I'm curious.
I don't think so. I think because of the three daughters and the fool and that whole story, it's a long play. But some of his history plays really are the ones that are not done.
Richard III is what
Okay.
I would say.
Oh.
Maybe not, like, performed less than King Lear. It's just my guess.
Yeah, perhaps. Although, I mean, that's an amazing piece as well. No,
Mm-hmm.
but King John or those Henry plays, not 4 and 5, but the 7 and 8, I think he wrote. There was some series of ones. They have to get creative with those. One of those is it's a trilogy. And I saw it done. This was at Ashland in Oregon at their Shakespeare Festival. They combined all three, which seemed like daunting because they're just a bunch of battles and a bunch of history, but they made it into a nice 2.5-hour show. Wow. So if you get creative with it and you're not afraid to, which something I had to learn, to cut Shakespeare. It seems sacrilegious to do that. But
Well, I figure if Branagh is doing that in Henry V, that's okay then.
But if you did Hamlet, the complete Hamlet, which he did as a film, it's over 4 hours. People, as much as these plays are great, you're going to lose your audience.
The modern audience is not going to abide by that. True. So it's aging out is a factor.
Yeah.
There aren't that many roles for the older actor. And I understand it completely. You've got to put fannies in the seats. Young, attractive people are going to sell tickets.
Yeah.
So it's just the reality of life.
And it seems like there's a new wave of people, especially with this one, seeing those men. That was always something we had a problem with. And maybe why we got so many roles, because there weren't that many men auditioning. There was always women. And there were some good actors in that show. And they were new to me and had some background. At least one had none, which was surprising. So I think the future's bright there as long as their careers and family don't get in the way, which is typically the problem.
Yeah. And also I think having probably enough knowledge of the community at large and how the population has sort of shifted and the general interest to be able to sustain not just here's a show, come audition and hope that we're as interested and curious as Tom was in college to just show up to an audition, but to open the doors to education, because theater education for adults just doesn't exist here. This is a town that's very family oriented, which is great. Lots of great young people, that give me a lot of hope every time I talk to them. My hope is renewed in the future. But at the same time, there's folks my age in the 20s who are attending NMC. There's no theater there anymore.
Right.
Yeah, that hasn't been there there may be one theater class, but once Chris Patino's had passed, I don't know that role was filled again. And I could be wrong. So if someone's listening and knows better, feel free to correct. But yeah, there really hasn't been a lot of consistent opportunity for folks to take, stage combat or learn directing or learn accents or learn how to read a script or stage management, like anything like that. And so you have folks that don't show up because I don't know where I'd start, So there's an important on-ramp, and I do think education plays a huge role in that.
I'm looking forward to seeing 4 old broads at the Old Town Playhouse.
Nan and Bernadette, I know,
That's
are in
right.
it. Who I've worked with them before. I think there's some new faces in that as well. So yes, that I'm excited to see, definitely. I think the last couple pieces I wanted to ask you about actually have more to do with what are some of your favorite roles you've done, both classical and modern?
This isn't the rapid
No, this is
round
not
at
rapid
this point.
fire, I promise.
I have had so many. I've been so fortunate to do these various roles. Dracula, just because it was such a long hiatus between shows that I had done.
And you got to slit your chest and have an attractive woman grab. Yeah, okay.
But, Ernest, I absolutely love Oscar Wilde. That play and Charlie's Aunt were a couple of the first 2 plays I ever saw as a teenager at ACT there in San Francisco. And it just they were so good and so funny and so wonderful in that. But the list goes on. Lion and Winter, playing Henry II that's just a marvelous role. And Camelot pushed me playing Arthur in that. Bless you, Ron Murden, for casting me in that. I'm not a singer, but he made me into that role.
You were Rex Harrison.
You
were Rex Harrison. And you
no,
were
it was actually Richard Harris. He was my inspiration because he sang those songs in that particular show. But we mentioned Noises Off before. Art was an amazing experience because I learned all about how to make a perfect vodka cocktail and with Matt and Mike Nunn. But 2 of my absolute favorites, though, were Woman in Black and The Drawer Boy. Both done in the studio and a couple reiterations of those later on in my life. But
Yeah.
just marvelous roles that way. And I mean, Anatomy of a Murder. too was another one where playing that Paul Beegler guy, the Jimmy Stewart part, that was a role where you got on the train when the show started, and I pretty much never left the stage. It was so many lines in every scene. And it was, I don't know, it was great, but I knew it. I had the thing, and you just got on, and here we go, see what happens. So.
Love it. How about you, Tom? Favorite roles?
Oh, as Jan said, so many. And as you've said, what stretches you as an actor, which takes you from one place to another. I loved being Orin Scrivello, the mad dentist in Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, fun.
And again, I thank every director who put their faith in me.
Yeah.
And I am so grateful to all of them for the wonderful opportunities. The late, great Pat Easterday, who directed Little Shop. What a great guy. I love Cyrano de Bergerac, thanks to Wizard. That was great fun. Love the Shakespeares. In Beauty and the Beast, thank you, Phil Murphy. I was coming out of a very difficult time in my own life. I had a 5-year-old daughter. We would watch Disney's Beauty and the Beast all the time.
I love that.
And I would imitate Gaston for my daughter. I'd rip my shirt open. And she'd scream in delight. And she somehow found out that they were putting the show on. She goes, Dad, this is what I want you to go and audition. Okay, dear, I'll do it. So I went just because my daughter wanted me to. So Phil cast me as Beast. And my daughter came with me to almost every rehearsal. Kathy Verstrady was so kind to make little bell dresses for her.
Aww.
And those are the things that you remember. That were just wonderful opportunities. In the studio, thanks again, Jan, for mentioning that. The father was Jeanette Mason, allowing me the freedom. It's such an intense play, a man falling into dementia.
Amazing play.
She allowed me, I had a suggestion, and that was, may I put out a chessboard at the opening of every act, and as the play goes on, the chess pieces disappear. And she allowed me to do that.
Love that.
And so I'm so grateful to her for that. In the Minutes was so much fun. Like, you and I were the old guys.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I don't think of myself. I'm a 23-year-old forever with a lot of scar tissue. And see these young, like Christoph was wonderful.
Yeah.
Everybody was so good in that.
I think both of us, too, we sort of talked ourselves into it. I think we...
Yes, we did.
If you can say it. We both wanted bigger roles, and in hindsight, we were absolutely thrilled that we had the roles we had. They were the right amount and let the others flourish. So
yes, that ego comes into it. We go into it and go, well, I can do this. I can do this. No, I couldn't. Ed Ronco was the man for the mayor, and Christoph was the guy.
Well, and I was thrilled, too, that Tom was going to be in it. I remember saying that to my wife that maybe, because she knows him well, that maybe Tom was going to be in it. She says, well, let me get on the phone. I'm going to talk that guy into it. He is not turning down his role if you're going to be in it.
And it was great. I'm so grateful to Julie. And to everybody I've performed with, bless them all. I thank them for all the directors for the opportunities.
Yeah.
For my fellow actors who worked so hard and did such marvelous work. I'm grateful to everybody.
Yeah. And there's more to come. I'm sure. We'll have more for y'all. Let's segue into rapid fire.
Oh, boy.
Feeling ready? Feel like the drum rolls? All right. So how this works is I have 5 questions. It's the same questions for each of you. I'm just going to ask each one, and then I guess we'll start with Jan, and then we'll go to Tom, and then I'll do the next question. We'll just get through the 5. I promise it'll be painless. All right. Ready. Favorite classical drama play?
Death of a Salesman.
Tom?
The Father.
Favorite modern comedy play?
Vanya, Sonia, Masha, Spike.
How far back can we go? The Man Who Came to Dinner.
Sure.
Okay.
Great. Favorite place to perform, whether existing or in the past?
It was the Depot.
Mm-hmm.
Depot?
The Depot.
Absolutely.
Right. Favorite performance ritual, something you do backstage to kind of help prep you before you perform? Tom?
I have an odd one. Before I go out, I am convinced I remember nothing. There's that moment backstage. I don't know what my opening line is. I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Think.
And so I'll ask the person who's a large male usually. I say, punch me up. Hit me as hard as you can. In the arm, in the chest.
Something.
Punch me.
Okay.
And that wakes me up.
All right.
I just like to be alone and focus. I pace and just focus. I don't like hanging out in the green room at all. That's like a party room. I'd much rather be by myself and pace and focus.
Punching and pacing. Got it. Favorite thing to do in Michigan outside of the performing arts?
Sit in my backyard, jungle forest in Leelanau County.
Watching a brown trout rise on the Ottaway River.
Wow, what a way to end. Fantastic. I love it. Thank you both so much for being here. We had just incredible content, and I love your stories, and I am certain there'll be roles that I'll see you both in the future.
Thank you to you for this opportunity, and thank you for seeing my dear friend.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Ditto. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Jan. Always a pleasure.
Always a joy.